Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Jasoda Nandana Braj Janaranjana Jasoda Nandana Braj Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Manachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Jashoda Nandana Braj Janaranjana Jashoda Nandana Braj Janaranjana Jashoda Nandana Braj Janaranjana Jashoda Nandana Braj Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Manachari Jamuna Tira Manachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pararaj Jagacharya Stoltra Satyas Divine Grace AC Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai ki jai, Jamuna Mai ki jai, Tulsi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Shishi Radha-Govinda ki jai, Shishi Gaurani Tai ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi ki jai, Jai Nitai Gauda Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Krishna Prasad Bali Shri Radha Swami Ti Namane Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Bali Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Ti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Ramani Pachani Devi Shri Chani Vani Pasha Hare Krishna. So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for being here this morning for the Srimad Bhagavatam class, and thank you very much to the devotees and leadership here at ISKCON New York City, Radha-Govinda Mandir, for continuing to allow me to come and be part of this wonderful community and to also speak, be here for the beautiful darshan of their lordships. It's a great honor and pleasure, so I'm very grateful to all of you and to the leadership here. Before we begin, I would like to first seek blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas that you see fit to bestow your mercy upon me so that I can speak something relevant and bona fide from the pages of this most exalted scripture, the Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. Only by the mercy of Vaishnavas is anything possible, so I am therefore seeking your blessings, especially Ram Roy Prabhu. Please, your mercy. Hare Krishna. Thank you. So we'll start with the invocation. And please repeat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 14, and verse number 2. This chapter is entitled, The Story of King Vena. And I'll be speaking on verse 3, but we'll be reading verse number 2 first. We'll recite verse number 3 together. Viramatara mahuya sunitam brahmavadinaha prakrita sammatam venam abhyashinchan patim bhuvaha. Translation. The great sages then called for Queen Mother Sunita, and with her permission, they installed Vena on the throne as master of the world. All the ministers, however, disagreed with this. Could speak for hours just on that verse. Okay, so let's please repeat. Verse number 3. Shutva nripasanagatam Venamatyugrashashanam Nililyo dasya vasadya Sarpa trashta ivakavaha Shutva nripasanagatam Venam atyugrashashanam Niliyo dasya vasadya Sarpa trashta ivakavaha Shutva nripasanagatam Venamat-yugrashashanam Nilayodasya vasadya Sarpachasta ivakavaha Shutva nirpasanam gatam Ladies, please. Shudra nirpasanagatam Nipasanagatam Venamat-yugrashashanam Iliyodasya vasadya. Word for word translation. Shrutva, after hearing. Nripa, of the king. Asanagatam, ascended to the throne. Venam, Vena, Ati, very. Ugra, severe. Shasanam, punisher. Niliyuhu, hid themselves. Dasyavaha, all the thieves. Sadyaha, immediately. Sarpa, from snakes. Chastaha, being afraid. Iva, like. Akavaha, rats. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. It was already known that Vena was very severe and cruel. Therefore, as soon as all the thieves and rogues in the state heard of his ascendance to the royal throne, they became very much afraid of him. Indeed, they hid themselves here and there as rats hide themselves from snakes. Purport. When the government is very weak, rogues and thieves flourish. Similarly, when the government is very strong, all the thieves and rogues disappear or hide themselves. Of course, Vena was not a very good king, but he was known to be cruel and severe. Thus, the state at least became freed from thieves and rogues. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitangena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Gena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So verse again. Shutva nripasana venam atyugra shasanam nilayor dasya vasadya sarpa trashta ivakavaha. It was already known that Vena was very severe and cruel. Therefore, as soon as all the thieves and rogues in the state heard of his ascendance to the royal throne, they became very much afraid of him. Indeed, they hid themselves here and there as rats hide themselves from snakes. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, Hare Krishna everyone, thank you once again for being here. Some of you maybe traveled farther than others to get here, so very nice to have you with us. And to all our viewers at home also. So I was also given this morning verse number 2. I just wanted to touch on that, as there are quite a number of important points just in that verse without the purport. I don't know. Oh, it's not up there. So it started with the great sages then called for the Queen Mother. And I was reminded, because of living in England for such a number of years, that recently when the Queen Mother passed, the installation was there of the new king. And just reminded of how much of the world, the global culture, ultimately comes from Vedic culture. And so many things are there. And with her permission. So even when a new prime minister would be elected, part of the program would be that new prime minister in England would have to go to the palace and seek the permission, even though they had been voted in, but they would get permission from the queen. So all of this is very much in line with culture, Vedic culture. And they installed Vena on the throne as master of the world, understanding that what we would call India or Bharat at that time was actually the entire globe. So whoever was elected as the king wasn't just the ruler of one country, but the ruler of the entire planet, the ruler of the entire world. All of the ministers, however, disagreed with this. And there we have, straight from the Shastra, that there will be difference of opinions. So we know that when Shukadev Goswami went to the bank of the Ganges and began fasting, that he was taking instruction or hearing from many different sadhus and sages who had gathered there, and they were all sort of offering different perspectives and opinions on the absolute truth, to which it's understood he wasn't actually very agreeable to any of them. And he was feeling extremely pleased when Shukadeva Goswami entered the assembly and began to speak on the principles of pure bhakti. So like that. But we see that the ministers were disagreeing with the sages, with the priests, with the sadhus. So like that. But who had the overall, let's say, authority, it was the sages. So this is a culture that is directed by Brahminical culture under the guise of Dharma and functioning in that way. So many points could be discussed there, but we'll go on to the next verse. And so there are quite a number of points here also that I wanted to discuss upon. And I usually prepare a PowerPoint, which I got about a quarter of the way through, because I became, sometimes when you prepare for a class, it's really wonderful because you open the book and you start reading, and then you dive in and you go on this magical journey around Srila Prabhupada's books, and you start looking for this and looking for that, and you find so many different points, and then you think, oh my God, where am I going to go? And then you realize it doesn't actually matter. I'm already where I'm meant to be, which is completely absorbed in Srila Prabhupada's books. But then the technical aspects kind of can be put to the wayside. So I came up with 5 points. So let's see if we get through them. The first point is that there is a purpose for everything. And actually I wanted to entitle this class, King Vena, the right king for the right time. So that is the title of this class, King Vena, the right king for the right time. And I found it interesting that sometimes when you Google for pictures from Krishna consciousness, you find so many, but there was hardly a picture of King Vena anywhere. So I was looking and looking and looking, and most of them were very low resolution. And the main one is from the cover of the 4th canto, where if you don't know the pastime and you don't look closely, you don't get it. But there's actually Vena's body, which is dead, and you have King Prithu and Archie who are coming out of that body. So that's kind of the highest graphic you can find of Vena so like that anyway. But there is a purpose for everything is the first point. Second point is the influence of association. Third point is seeing the Lord's hand. Fourth point is a blind uncle. And the fifth point is to persist and to persevere. Persistence and perseverance. So the first point on the purpose of everything, I was kind of pulled into an example of our Vaishnava history where we're taught that the Lord incarnates and comes himself, or he sends his representative at different times for different purposes. And these purposes are always perfect and complete, although we may not always understand them. Of course, the Lord coming as a fish, as Matsya, he comes as a boar, he comes as a half man, half lion, he comes in all these different forms for a specific purpose. So I was thinking in relation to all of this, we have the appearance of Lord Buddha, and how Buddha appeared and taught basically atheism for all intents and purposes. There are some differences of opinion on that, but in essence, there is no real God. There are demigods, there are rulers over the material world, but there's no real creator. But at its essence, Lord Buddha taught many different things called Dharma, which the primary being that one shouldn't harm others. Ahimsa, this principle of ahimsa, to not harm others. And we know that even though teaching atheism, Lord Buddha had a purpose. And what was his purpose? Ironically, his purpose was to take people away from the Brahmana class, who were actually misusing Shastra for the purpose of animal sacrifice. So actually, although Buddha was teaching atheism, but he was God. So he was encouraging people to follow him nonetheless, and as God, those people who followed him. And Buddhism, kind of starting around 563 BC, predominated much of India for many, many years, until another personality appeared, this time a representative of the Lord. And that representative of the Lord was Lord Shiva in the guise of a sadhu, a pandit, but specifically and directly sent by the Lord for the purpose of uprooting that atheistic view, mentality, or taking people away from Buddhism. And his name is Shankaracharya. So he came specifically to bring people back to the Vedic literature, but unfortunately he couldn't take them away so quickly. So it was a sort of level of atheism, monism, teaching that everything is one. We're all one. There is a God, but we're all God. And we can all become God, and we can all merge into God, and like that. So many details we won't get into. And this was around 8th or 9th century AD. So a very long time between Lord Buddha's arrival and the arrival of Shankaracharya. And then around 11th or 12th century, another personality appeared. Anyone can think of who that would be? Yes, Ramanujacharya, actually. Ramanujacharya came first. He was around 11th to 12th century AD. And he introduced Vishishtadvaita, emphasizing God or Brahman, and that souls are also, although distinct, they are related in part of the whole in nature. So he introduced kind of what is actually more like our philosophy, and also promoting primarily bhakti. Then came Madhvacharya, and he came in the 13th century. And Madhvacharya being the acharya of our actual sampradaya lineage, the Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya, Vaishnav Sampradaya. So Madhvacharya came and he developed Dvaita, and we know that he was known mostly for doing this. Yes, exactly. Two. Distinctly there are two. It is not one. And his mission primarily was just to wipe out and really annihilate the Mayavad philosophy, the impersonalistic philosophy, the monistic philosophy, the Dvaita, the Advaita philosophy. So promoting that Dvaitavad. And then finally, around the 15th century, the end of the 15th century, again, a lot of time. If we look at the time, and this is an important point, so much time is passing. There's not one person who would have seen all of this go on in their one lifetime. Does that make sense? So just between Madhvacharya, which is the 13th century, and Lord Chaitanya in the end of the 15th century, that's like well over 100 years. So it's unlikely anyone had experience of both of them being present at the same time. So, and of course we know Lord Chaitanya came and gave us Achintya Bheda, Abheda Tattva, which is what we follow and which we understand as the perfection, the pentultimate understanding of the relationship between the jiva and God, that we are inconceivably one with God. So he didn't kick out oneness. We are one with God because we're part of God, because we're part of God's energy. And the energy and the energetic in one sense are one, but they are also distinctly unique and individual. So we are simultaneously one and different from the Supreme Lord. So this is Lord Chaitanya. So we've kind of gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and you might be thinking, what has all this got to do with King Vena? Well, the point of sharing all this is that each one of these personalities came at a specific time for a specific purpose and served a specific function in the service of the Lord. All of them. Buddha, Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, and of course Lord Chaitanya. They were either representatives or the Lord personally themselves. And they came in a space of vast amount of time in order to generate and create change. So they served a specific purpose. which was the point of number one, that there is a purpose for everything. So there is a purpose for everything in this world, whether we can see it or understand it or not. And I often like to share this beautiful analogy that Dinabandhu Prabhu from Vrindavan gave once of the tapestry. I don't remember if I shared this here, but a tapestry, if you know what a tapestry is, it has a front and a back side. And the front side is usually so ornate and beautifully decorated, little beads, sometimes mirrors, threaded very immaculately. But if you look at the back side of the tapestry, it's usually lots of little strings hanging hither and thither, and it just looks like a complete mess. So he was sharing how actually there are two different ways of seeing the world. There's seeing the world from the sublime perspective or from the transcendental or godly perspective, and there's seeing it from the other perspective, the materialistic perspective. And actually, if we look, often we're just seeing a bit of a mess, and we can't really make sense of it because we're looking from the underneath, from the backside. But when Krishna is looking at things, he sees how everything is working perfectly. Everything is moving perfectly according to his plan. Meanwhile, we're like, why did that happen to me? Why did this happen to them? How come this is going? How could God let this, right? These kind of things come out. So, but for Krishna, everything is happening perfectly. He has a purpose. It's all unfolding. And for us right now, Lord Chaitanya's appearance is part of that purpose, part of that plan. And each and every one of us have had the wonderful opportunity to become part of that purpose. And it's all heading in a certain direction. It's probably not going to change. It's heading deeper and deeper into Kali Yuga. Haribol. And it's leading to the point where another personality will enter the scene, and his name will be Kalki. And he will take a sword, and he will annihilate all the miscreants and wipe everyone out. So it's not that history is going to change, which means there's clearly a plan. There's clearly a purpose. Things are working in a certain direction. And right now we have the opportunity of being part of the golden age of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So there is a purpose for everything. So how does this relate to King Vena? Because King Vena was the right king for the right time. As stated in the verse that we read today, that King Vena, although he was a very cruel and sinister personality, but in the absence of a good king, he was the right king for that time, because there wasn't any king, which is a point that we discuss a little bit later on. But he was the person that had to take the throne. Now, there is also some backstory with King Vena, not so easy to find, but actually in the Padma Purana, it explains a little bit about his history, and of course his mother's history primarily. So what is his mother's history? Well, she is the daughter of, yes, death, of Mrityu. So when your grandfather is death, then, there's like not much hope really, is there? It's like, and your mother is the daughter of death. And somehow it was described that she actually herself, Sunita was actually herself a little bit kind of devious or wicked in a certain way. And of course, if you're born as the daughter of death, there's going to be something in the family line. You're born in a certain family. The parents are the first gurus, so you learn from them. You learn everything, and you just think things are normal. Many of us coming from Western culture, and still now, recently was visiting with some family, and they don't think anything of killing animals, eating whatever it is, the most abominable different things. And they just think it's normal because that's the parampara, the sampradaya, the dynasty that they have come in, and they just think that it's normal. So being the son of Mrityu, then it's described that she actually was in the forest abusing one Gandharva boy. and she was taking great relish and pride in it. And by this abusive mentality, wicked mentality, eventually the Gandharva boy, although he tolerated so much, but he eventually cursed her. And he cursed her that whenever she would get married, she would give birth to a notorious and misdirected boy who would harass the world as an evil king. So this is, of course, King Vena. So, but it is described there that actually she continued to perform. She went to speak to her father. She continued to perform austerities, and she began to worship Vishnu, specifically to overcome this curse. And of course, she was later guided also that because you worship Vishnu, then everything will be okay. But she did get a husband, King Anga, and she did have a child, King Vena. But also the process of getting for Vena to be born was also quite interesting, because King Anga, having no Prabhupada also describes that, or it's described in Bhagavatam, that also in his previous life he had also done some things that were causing him to get a karmic reaction, which is why he couldn't get a son. And during the sacrifice where he was trying to get a son, the priest said, the demigods aren't coming. They're not really accepting the offerings. And it doesn't really have to do with you in this life, but in a previous life it was like this. So you need to offer the oblation specifically to Vishnu. And so with focus on Vishnu in his heart, he offered these oblations into the fire, and this personality appeared, this divine personality appeared holding this pot of payasan, of sweet rice or kheer, which of course if a personality shows up with some sweet rice, we're all usually pretty happy. And he shows up and he offers it to the king, and he takes and gives some to his queen, and he takes some himself, and then basically Sunita becomes pregnant with a son. But somehow this karmic situation had passed through. So here he is with a son, but the son becomes actually just such a devious person, so sinister, that as a father, he's trying to correct him, trying to chastise him, but Vena won't listen to anything. He can't hear. And so therefore the father, King Anga, he becomes completely disgusted with family life. And he decides to leave the kingdom, leave family life, and go to the forest. So this brings us to the third point, which is that King Anga, second point was the influence of association, which is in our family we may also get association. And in life, we come into contact with different persons, and that association can have very profound, or it can have very detrimental effect on us. So we have to be very careful of the association that we choose. And we see that in this pastime, the association of the lineage that Vena was coming from had a profound impact on him. Next is how King Anga, even though he was feeling tortured by the fact that he didn't get a son, a rightful heir to the throne, he was feeling so tortured, but he saw the Lord's hand, and he understood, actually, if I had had a good son, I would have remained attached to my family, remained attached to this life, and just gone deeper and deeper into it. But actually having a bad son is a blessing, because now I just want to walk away from everything. And of course it's described that he walked away and renounced the kingdom, renounced family life, went to the forest. So this is the ability to see the Lord's hand even in the most difficult of situations, which usually isn't easy. Usually we see the Lord's hand as a thing to blame, someone to blame for what's happening. Why is this happening to me? But actually King Anga was able to see the Lord's hand. And then, of course, as the story unfolds, and we're here at this point now, we see that King Vena was installed on the throne, and he served also a purpose. And we see that in the absence of a king, what happened was that the kingdom became vulnerable to dacoits, to other people coming in and exploiting the resources of the kingdom. And so the Brahmanas felt that it was best that Vena was installed as the king. The ministers didn't want him anywhere near the throne because they knew it would just be insanity, complete insanity to have him on the throne. But the Brahmanas thought a blind uncle is better than no uncle, as Prabhupada would say. So a blind uncle is better than no uncle means that it's better to have a bad king than no king. Prabhupada also said that sometimes it may be better to have a bad leader than no leader at all. Better to follow that bad leader. I think he meant that primarily in the world of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes we have a tendency to complain about leaders. Don't know if anyone's noticed that around, but the tendency is like that. But better to at least have a bad leader than no leader at all. Of course, the ideal would be to have a good leader. And of course, we can all be armchair philosophers and sit and discuss and, oh, well, he should be or she should be like this and like that and like that. And we can all wish and dream for the perfect, self-realized, self-effulgent avatar of the Supreme Lord to descend and take up the position of leadership. Meanwhile, here we sit in an armchair just speculating on the situation and not accepting what may be the actual reality. Of course, Prabhupada would often discuss about the leaders of the world. And last night we were reading something from My Glorious Master. We were at Matchless Gifts for Prabhupada Meditations, reading from Burijan Prabhu's book. And in that, it mentioned a section, he mentioned the Republicans and the Democrats. and then we said, oh, we probably shouldn't read this. We don't want to get into the political conversation. And then someone said, why? They're both rascals. Or that's what Burijan Prabhu said, actually. He said to Prabhupada said, what is this Republican and Democrat? And Burijan Prabhu said, they're all rascals. They're all cheaters, basically. So like that. So in one sense, Prabhupada was very heavy with world leaders, global leaders, and persons who take the post of trying to lead the public, but actually they have no dharma. And this is the downfall of Vena. Even though he was serving a purpose, which was he was keeping the dacoits and the rogues and thieves out, but actually he also came under the influence of Mrityu, of his grandfather, and he was prone to think in an atheistic way. He was prone to discourage dharma, promote adharma, think that he's God, I am the supreme, which is this strong propensity of the false ego to override and conduct our entire lives. So like that. So we see that this is the principle, the fourth point, which is a blind uncle is better than no uncle. And the final point, the last point to make today, is to persist and persevere. So we can see, and a little bit of a spoiler alert here for those of you who are on the edge of your seats with the Srimad Bhagavatam daily readings. You're like, what's next? What's going to happen next? Well, a little bit of a spoiler alert. So if you don't want to hear, you have to close your ears like this. But actually, we know that King Vena, basically, eventually, he will just cross one too many lines, and those same brahmanas who wanted to elect him into the position and enthroned him also decided to do something that brahmanas hardly ever do. They actually killed him. Sorry. Yes, tragedy. But from his thighs, the brahmanas churned his thighs, and from him came different personalities, but specifically, eventually, through the persistence and patience and perseverance, the kingdom actually wound up getting a right and just king. So a right and just leader appeared in the form of Prithu Maharaj. And actually in the Bhagavatam, Prithu Maharaj's pastimes cover so much of the 4th canto. In fact, recently we were reading this in our Bhagavatam Bites, and every new chapter was like, Prithu, Prithu. I was like, dear Lord, Prithu is such an important personality, but we really hardly ever speak much of him. Prahlad, Dhruva Maharaj, and Shukadev, and the Pandavas, different, we speak, but hardly ever do we really glorify Prithu. So all of you are on the verge, on the edge of having several months, if not years, of the glorification of Prithu Maharaj, which is wonderful because he is a plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he appeared also for the purpose, like Lord Ram, to teach how to lead and how to guide. So eventually the kingdom, through persistence and perseverance, they got the righteous king that they needed. They got the righteous king that they wanted. But at this time, King Vena was the perfect person, even though he was completely imperfect in so many ways. So also the point being that also we ourselves have to sometimes persevere with situations that may not be the best. Has anyone ever had that experience where it just seems like life is not dealing you the cards that you feel like you should be dealt? I'm not the only one? Okay. And sometimes we just have to, as they say, play the hand we've been dealt. And deal with it, whether it's some physical difficulty, some mental, emotional, intellectual, whatever the difficulty may be, spiritual challenges, but we have to persevere. And we see that Krishna ultimately has that plan. There is an ultimate purpose. And usually something that we're going through, especially when the times are tough, yields the most beautiful jewels, the most beautiful pearls of wisdom. Recently, I'm listening to the audio book, and Chitralila Devi is here. She's translating The Journey Home into French. I'm listening to the narration, and just, I keep being reminded, like, really? God, one tragedy after another, And then it's like, you just think, but every time, Maharaj is trying to find that pearl of wisdom, praying to the Lord, what can I learn from this situation? My dear Lord, you've obviously put me in this situation because I trust you completely, absolutely. So you've done this to me. So what am I meant to learn here? And then trying to learn from these situations, all the while persisting and persevering with our service and our attempts to try to practice the path of bhakti. Hare Krishna. I think I'll finish there. If anyone has any comments, questions, reflections, chastisements. Yes, Prabhuji. I think someone can take him the mic.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for the class.
Thank you for chopping vegetables for the Raj Bhoga.
It's going to be cooked by a great devotee.
Yes, my wife.
I was just one question. I vaguely remember in Madhurya Kadambini, it was mentioning that any bad thing that happens to a devotee or any misfortune, it's not exactly one's karma, because once someone starts the path of devotion, then it is directly Krishna trying to teach you a lesson on the path of devotion. Could you explain a little bit more about that and maybe how that ties in?
Nice, thank you. So, my understanding is Srila Prabhupada makes similar statements. At the time of course, again, we were just hearing last night how Prabhupada gave a talk, and someone, was it a talk? Anyway, there was something, and someone asked him, "Are you transcendental?" Like that, and Prabhupada said, "Yes." And then he pointed to the disciples, and he said, "And so are all of my disciples." And of course, we know the pastime when they asked Prabhupada, "How many pure devotees are there?" And he said, "How many disciples do I have?" And they said, Prabhupada, we're not pure devotees. And he said, a mango is a mango. Whether it's a green mango or a ripe mango, it's still a mango. So if you're on the path of pure devotion or on the, you're either a pure devotee in perfection or you're a pure devotee in practice. So, so this idea of karma, Srila Prabhupada explained that, of course, in one sense you could say we're all free from karma as soon as we start chanting the holy names sincerely. But at the same time, Srila Prabhupada explains, and it's explained later in the 10th canto, that even when we take initiation, the spiritual master takes all of our karma. That's what we understand. But actually it's described that there still has to be a little bit of karma left for us to work through. But that karma is, Srila Prabhupada coined the phrase, anyone knows what he called it? Krishna karma. He called it Krishna karma. And he said that Krishna is like the doctor who is personally administering the medicine of that karma to help us become free from the last residue of material attachment. So there's still something left. Otherwise, I guess in one sense, if you don't have any karma whatsoever, then hypothetically you wouldn't still have a body. But still, we have the pure devotee. Prabhupada was here. Spiritual master is there. Do we say that they have karma? Well, they may also still experience challenges and difficulties. But that's a different kind of a karma. It's not the same as the karma of a materialist who is forced to undergo something as a rectification exactly. But Krishna karma means that Krishna is giving us some challenge or difficulty so that we can take deeper shelter of Him and ultimately come to a point of full surrender to the Supreme Lord, to Krishna. And also that, as we see in the case of someone like Prahlad Maharaj or Dhruva Maharaj, these are pure devotees, that they had to undergo also quite intense, severe apparent punishment or difficulties, but later they're glorified. So just like Srila Prabhupada suffered 2 heart attacks on the Jaladuta on the way here, and we think, God, that must be some really intense karma, for Prabhupada. But now we talk about it almost in a way of, it's like a glorification of Srila Prabhupada. So the challenge is that in the material world, we see things often in a dualistic way, that we see good and bad, right and wrong. But on the spiritual platform, actually, everything is simply the mercy of the Lord. Everything is simply the mercy of the Lord. So whatever happens, it is just simply the mercy of the Lord. The Lord's hand is behind it. Not a blade of grass moves without the intervention of the Lord or the sanction of the Lord, and especially in the life of a devotee. So it either happens through the means of karma for a materialistic person or Krishna karma for the devotees. So like that. But that's not always so easy to distinguish. And at what level does it become Krishna karma and not my previous karma? And probably until we're on the perfected platform, there's probably still some residual karma. And of course, if we're not following strictly, we may start to create karma also. So that's why at the time of initiation, you take vows to not cross a certain line where you would create more karma. But the tendency or the challenge may be to start doing those things again. And then, of course, you come under the guise of the material energy. So like that. Anyway, those are a few thoughts. I don't know if anyone else can embellish or if you had some other thoughts. Okay. Yes, dear mother. And I've forgotten your name again. Chaturmaya Devi, yes. Thank you.
Thank you for the lovely class. There's a wonderful prayer that goes, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, and the courage to take action, and the wisdom to know the difference. So in this wonderful pastime, you have 2 instances where the Both the sages and King Anga were asking for serenity. Neither one of them chose to be proactive and try to change the situation. For instance, I was thinking with the sages, why didn't they take that initiative? Because a Brahmin can become a Kshatriya when the situation warrants. Why wouldn't they want to be proactive like that? And how do we know in our lives, where do we accept it, or do we try to change?
Beautiful. Well, that's why we pray for the wisdom to know the difference. Yeah, beautiful prayer. I love that prayer. Thank you for reminding me. So first, I think it's important that we accept that as we'll hear from the next verses, the sages, the brahmanas, they did try to change and rectify King Vena. It wasn't that they just said, well, we don't want to do it, I can't be bothered. Let's just put him on the throne. And then, we can go and chant Hare Krishna. It wasn't quite like that. They still tried to advise him. They still tried to guide him. They tried to instruct him. They tried to tell him, no, this isn't right. You should do it like, why are you doing like this? They knew that it was a very slim chance, but they still tried. King Anga also tried to rectify him. So the point is that sometimes we may try and try and try again, and then it comes to a point where we realize that this just isn't going to change. As they say, I'm just banging my head against a brick wall and expecting it to change, Or what's that saying? There's another saying that, I climbed the ladder for so many years and then I realized it was against the wrong wall. So it's like that. So sometimes we have to realize that, maybe this isn't my service or my duty. So I think it's important that we see that it's not that they didn't try. So, and then sometimes you just have to accept what you have. And the brahmanas, at least from my understanding, in general, they don't want to take that position. It's just not in accordance with their nature. Mother Urmila has this book called Career Dharma. And in that, and I've had some discussions with her, she talks very much that it's like, yes, no problem, a Brahmin can become a Kshatriya, but a Brahmana will not be a Kshatriya like a Kshatriya will be a Kshatriya. Because a Brahmana just doesn't think like that. Okay, I can take the post, but still they're going to feel like, well, this is all the Lord's mercy. They're much more passive. Kshatriyas are much more proactive. They're decision makers. They take the bull by the horns kind of thing. Whereas a Brahmana will be like, let's just see how the Lord's plan unfolds. So for someone who has Kshatriya propensities, interacting with Brahmanas can be crazy because they're like, why don't you just do something about it? And they're like, just be patient. And you're like, patience? My patience have come to an end. Because the Kshatriyas are more passionate. Otherwise, how are you going to go out and fight? How are you going to protect things? The sadhus are like, no problem, trample me, ashli shava padaritam pinushtamam, you can trample me. Doesn't matter. I'm still your worshipful, you're still my worshipful Lord. So the Brahmanas are much more passive. So they're reluctant to take such positions. If they have to, absolutely. Okay, then someone will do that. But it's generally not something done. So then if there's a person, and there was the king's son. He is the rightful heir to the throne. So let us, and this is another thing that as a person from, a background of a lack of culture, when you read something like the Ramayana, it's like, why didn't they just, why did Lord Ram accept all this stuff? Why didn't you just say, hey, Dad, you're in Maya. I don't care what she says. I'm not doing any of that because it's wrong, It's like, and, there's so many things that in the modern day, there'd be protests, people sign petitions, and it'd be like, we're not letting Ram go to the forest, we're going to boycott Ayodhya, which they kind of did anyway. But, you know what I mean? We as... I speak for myself, coming from the Malecha and Yavana race, I have a different perspective on the way things should be conducted. But culturally, they do, the right thing, quote unquote. Whether it feels good or not, whether it looks good or not, the right thing was that King Vena should be installed. He is the rightful heir to the throne. So like that. So those are a few reflections, and I don't even know if I answered your question, but I had fun trying to answer it anyway. So Hare Krishna. All right, so I think that we'll finish here because we're just a minute or two past 9. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, King Vena ki. Hare Krishna. Gaur Bhakta Vrindas ki.